The fluorescent lights in the Pine Grove Community Center felt like interrogation lamps as I sat at the long conference table, my hands folded tightly in my lap. 12 pairs of judgmental eyes bored into me, while Karen Whitaker, our esteemed HOA president, strode to the front of the room in her signature pastel pink blazer, her helmet of bleached blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her smile as fake as the community values she preached. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, clicking her presentation remote with the dramatic flair of a game show host. "Today marks a new chapter for Pine Grove Estates. My proposed enforcement initiative will protect our property values and maintain the standards that make our neighborhood the envy of the county." Murmurs of approval rippled through the board members. Most of them were her hand-picked allies. I knew what was coming. Karen had rehearsed this moment in her McMansion mirror while I was probably watering my sad little vegetable patch at night to avoid her spies. "But before we celebrate this victory for decency," Karen continued, her voice dripping with false concern, "I have some personal business to address regarding one resident who seems determined to drag us all down." The room fell silent. Karen pulled out a thick manila envelope and walked directly toward me, her heels clicking like tiny hammers of doom on the tile floor. Every eye followed her. With a theatrical flourish, she slid the envelope across the table until it stopped in front of me. "Rachel," she said loud enough for the back row to hear, "consider this your final warning and violation notice." I stared at the papers spilling out. Photos of my non-compliant garden, fines totaling $8,500, and a thinly veiled threat of lien on my house. 8 years of living here. 8 years of watching this woman turn a suburban paradise into her personal fiefdom, reduced to this public execution. David Rodriguez, her loyal treasurer and constant shadow, snickered from across the table. 2 other board members joined in with nervous laughter. Karen's grin widened as she basked in their approval, completely oblivious to the trap she had just walked into. "Don't look so shocked, dear," Karen continued, turning back to face the room. "We both know your little vegetable patch has been an eyesore for months. Now everyone else knows too." More uncomfortable chuckles echoed around the table. The community center's air felt thicker than usual. But Karen was just getting started. "Now, where were we?" she said, clicking to the next slide. "Ah, yes. The new enforcement breakdown." But something was wrong. Karen's confident expression flickered for just a moment as she glanced at the screen behind her. The slide that should have shown colorful renderings of enhanced curb appeal displayed something entirely different. Bank statements, financial records, email screenshots, document after document of evidence that would destroy everything Karen had built. The room erupted in gasps and shocked whispers. Karen spun around to face the screen, her face draining of all color as she saw her crimes displayed in high definition for everyone to see. "What the hell is this?" she stammered, frantically clicking her remote. But the slides kept advancing, each one more damning than the last. Embezzled HOA dues, kickbacks from the landscaping contractor, stolen credit for resident suggestions. 3 months of careful documentation that Harold and I had gathered in secret. David's snickering stopped abruptly. The other board members leaned forward in their chairs, studying the evidence with growing horror. Karen turned to look at me, her eyes wide with panic and confusion. For the first time in years, the queen of Pine Grove Estates was speechless. The woman who had humiliated me in front of the entire neighborhood, who had cheated the community with her secret deals, who had stolen from the dues that trusted her, finally understood that her perfect little kingdom was crumbling. But this was only the beginning. What do you think Karen will do when she realizes her quiet neighbor has been planning this revenge for months? Drop a comment below and let me know if you think she deserves what's coming to her. 6 months earlier, the Pine Grove Estates annual block party sparkled with 4 smiles and overpriced lemonade stands. I stood beside my little vegetable garden in my simple sundress, the one Karen had once side-eyed because it wasn't neighborhood-approved pastel. Her hand rested possessively on the podium as she mingled with the community's elite. "Rachel, your garden looks charming," gushed Patricia Morrison from down the street, the same woman whose complaint Karen had used to start this mess. Karen is so lucky to have such dedicated residents like you. I smiled the practice smile I'd perfected over 8 years of HOA hell. Thank you, Patricia. I'm just proud of what I've managed to grow after everything. Karen squeezed the microphone a little too tight. Rachel gave up her landscaping business to support the community standards, she announced to the small crowd gathered around us. Not many widows would make that sacrifice. The way she said it made my stomach twist, like I was some noble martyr instead of a woman who'd been slowly erased from her own life. I'd run a small garden design firm before my husband passed, and Karen convinced the board that personal projects needed full HOA oversight. How inspirational, Patricia sighed. True community partnership. If only she knew about the late-night texts Karen sent to her favorite contractor, Rebecca, or the way she spoke to me when no one else was listening. Karen, congratulations on the new landscaping contract, said Robert Chun, one of the senior homeowners. Brilliant strategy work. I watched Karen's face light up with pride as she accepted praise for work that actually belonged to old Mr. Jenkins from down the block. I'd seen the original proposals in her briefcase at the last open meeting, Mr. Jenkins's name carefully crossed out and replaced with her own. Just doing my job, Karen replied with false modesty. Though I have to admit it required some creative thinking. Creative thinking. That's what she called stealing other people's ideas. The evening continued with more congratulations, more praise from my devoted neighborhood dictator. I played my part perfectly, laughing at her jokes, agreeing with her opinions, never contradicting her in public. But inside, something was shifting. When we finally returned to our cookie-cutter homes, Karen immediately loosened her blazer and grabbed a glass of Chardonnay. Great night, she said, not looking at me as she scrolled her phone. The new contract is practically in the bag. Rebecca seemed lovely. I offered, hanging up my gardening gloves. She's useful, Karen replied, typing rapidly. Her company controls half the maintenance bids in the county. I watched her fingers fly across the screen. At 11:30 at night, she was texting someone with urgent intensity. While I moved closer, she quickly turned the phone away. Board emergency, she said without looking up. You know how it is. But I'd seen enough to catch a glimpse of the contact name. Rebecca with a little heart emoji. I'm on bed, I announced, testing her. She grunted, still focused on her phone. I'll be up in a few minutes. Those few minutes turned into 2 hours. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Karen's muffled laughter drifting from her patio. She was video chatting with someone, her voice low and intimate in a way I'd never heard her use at public meetings. The next morning, I found her laptop open on the kitchen counter. Karen was in the shower, singing off-key, like she always did when she was in a particularly good mood. Steam drifted from under the bathroom door as I glanced at the screen. Financial spreadsheets filled the monitor, but something looked wrong. The numbers didn't match the quarterly reports I'd seen posted on the community bulletin board. Homeowner dues were listed at different amounts with unexplained transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. My old marketing background had taught me to spot inconsistencies, and these numbers were full of them. Either Karen was incredibly careless with her record keeping or something much more serious was happening. The shower turned off. I quickly closed the laptop and busied myself making coffee. My mind raced with questions I wasn't ready to ask out loud. Karen appeared in the kitchen 15 minutes later, her hair still damp, wearing the pastel blazer that made her look like the perfect HOA president everyone believed her to be. "Morning, dear," she said, kissing the air near my cheek with the same casual affection she'd show a stranger. But as she grabbed her briefcase and headed for the door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Sticking out from a side pocket was a document with Mr. Jenkins's name on it and Karen's handwriting in the margins. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Karen had left for her early board strategy meeting, the same excuse she'd been using for weeks. I was cleaning the community center storage room, something I'd volunteered for countless times before, when her laptop chimed with an incoming message. The screen was still open from the night before. Karen had fallen asleep on the couch again, claiming she was too exhausted to drive home after working late. As I reached to close the laptop, a notification popped up that made my heart stop. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Last night was incredible. R." My hands trembled as I stared at the message. Rebecca, her favorite contractor, the young woman with a bright smile who always seemed to find excuses to inspect Karen's property after hours. I knew I should close the laptop and pretend I'd never seen it. That's what the old Rachel would have done. The Rachel who'd spent 8 years making excuses for Karen's behavior. But something inside me had shifted during those sleepless nights listening to her secret phone calls. I clicked on the message thread. What I found destroyed any remaining illusion about our perfect neighborhood. Months of explicit messages, photos I couldn't bear to look at for more than a second, plans for weekend site visits that Karen had told the board were business trips. Rebecca calling her queen, and Karen responding with promises about leaving her boring little board duties once her re-election came through. My legs gave out. I sank into the folding chair, the same chair where she'd sat just hours earlier, probably texting her while I pulled weeds under her watchful eye. But the messages were just the beginning. As I scrolled through her recent files, trying to understand how long this had been going on, I stumbled across something even worse. Financial documents, bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of, contractor bids with altered payment amounts, a spreadsheet labeled Personal Enhancement Fund that showed systematic transfers from Pine Grove HOA dues to Karen's private accounts. My old background kicked in, and I began analyzing the numbers with growing horror. Karen wasn't just bending rules. She was stealing from the community. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 2 years, carefully skimmed from landscaping budgets and emergency funds. I found invoices where she had inflated costs and pocketed the difference. Expense reports for site visits that had actually been romantic getaways with Rebecca. Even worse, I discovered she'd been taking credit for other resident suggestions, submitting their ideas under her own name, and collecting board accolades for their achievements. The Mr. Jenkins document I'd glimpsed weeks earlier was just one of dozens. Karen had built her entire presidency on stolen ideas and embezzled money. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "Working late again tonight? Don't wait up." I stared at the message, knowing she was probably already with Rebecca, planning their next betrayal while I sat surrounded by evidence of her crimes. But who could I tell? Karen had carefully cultivated relationships with everyone on the board. Her charm offensive had worked on the entire neighborhood. If I accused her without concrete proof, she'd find a way to discredit me. She'd probably claim I was a grieving widow having a breakdown. Then I remembered Harold Jenkins. Harold had been my neighbor and mentor when I first moved in after my husband passed. He tried to convince me not to give up my garden design work, warning me that depending entirely on HOA approval was dangerous. I dismissed his concerns as old-fashioned thinking, but now his words echoed in my mind. Harold was also one of Pine Grove's founding members and still held significant influence on the board. More importantly, he was one of the few people who'd known me before I became Karen's favorite target. I spent the rest of the day copying files to a secure drive, my hands shaking as I documented each piece of evidence. Bank statements, altered contracts, stolen proposals, and screenshots of Karen's messages with Rebecca. Everything that proved our HOA president was not just a bully, but a criminal. That evening, I called Harold from my car in the grocery store parking lot, using the excuse of shopping to explain why I wasn't home. "Harold, it's Rachel Bennett. I need to meet with you privately. It's about Karen, and it's urgent." There was a long pause before Harold responded, his voice careful and measured. "Rachel, I've been hoping you'd call. I think we need to talk." Harold Jenkins's home office felt like a sanctuary compared to the suffocating atmosphere of the community center. Surrounded by decades of neighborhood awards and family photos, I sat across from the man who'd once been my ally, watching his weathered face grow grave as he reviewed the evidence I'd brought. "This is worse than I suspected," Harold said quietly, setting down the financial documents. "Rachel, how long has this been going on?" "The affair, at least 6 months that I can prove, but the embezzlement, I pulled up the spreadsheet on my laptop. It goes back almost 2 years, right after her last re-election. Harold leaned back in his leather chair, his gray eyes troubled. I've been watching Karen for months. Her sudden rise never sat right with me. Projects that should have taken the board weeks were being completed overnight. Deals that seasoned homeowners struggled with seemed to fall in her lap effortlessly. Because she was stealing other people's ideas, I said, my voice bitter. I found at least 12 instances where she submitted someone else's suggestion under her own name. Mr. Jenkins came to me 3 months ago, Harold revealed. He suspected someone was taking credit for his tree planting proposal, but he couldn't prove it. I told him to document everything, but then he suddenly stopped pursuing it. My stomach dropped. Karen got him transferred to the inactive list. She told me it was a promotion, but it was to silence him. Harold's jaw tightened. Rachel, what you've uncovered here isn't just theft. It's systematic fraud that could destroy Pine Grove's reputation if it comes out the wrong way. Over the next 2 weeks, Harold and I developed a careful plan. I would continue gathering evidence from home while Harold investigated from within the board. We had to be absolutely certain of our facts before making any accusations. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal at home and at neighborhood events. Karen had grown increasingly cruel, as if my silence gave her permission to show her true nature. She'd bring Rebecca to board events now, introducing her as her indispensable maintenance partner, while I stood beside her like a piece of outdated lawn decor. You know, Rachel, she said one evening over the community potluck, you've really let your standards slip lately. Maybe you should consider hiring a professional gardener. I looked down on my untouched plate, biting back the response that burned in my throat. Instead, I smiled weakly. You're probably right. Rebecca keeps everything in such great shape, she continued, cutting her salad with deliberate precision. She runs 5 miles every morning, very disciplined. Each cruel comment was another nail in her coffin. I'd started recording our conversations on my phone, documenting her emotional abuse alongside her financial crimes. Meanwhile, Harold was making his own discoveries. He'd gained access to Karen's office files during a weekend maintenance check and found even more damning evidence. Karen had been manipulating contractor billing, adding phantom expenses, and routing the excess payments to her personal accounts. She'd stolen over $347,000, Harold told me during one of our secret meetings at a coffee shop across town. And that's just what I could trace. The real number could be much higher. But Karen wasn't just stealing money. Harold discovered she'd been selling confidential neighborhood bids to competitors, using her access to HOA systems to gather intelligence that she then sold for additional profit. She's been playing both sides, Harold explained, showing me encrypted emails on his tablet, bidding against her own community contracts, then using inside information to undercut our proposals. The evidence was overwhelming, but we needed the perfect moment to reveal it. Karen was scheduled to present her new enforcement initiative at the next annual meeting, the same initiative she'd been bragging about for weeks. She's planning something, I told Harold after another evening of Karen's increasingly aggressive behavior. She keeps talking about big changes and how some people are going to be very surprised soon. Harold's expression grew grim. David mentioned she's requested a private meeting with him after the presentation. Rachel, I think she's planning to make her move. That night, I found violation papers hidden in Karen's briefcase. Not drafts or notes from a lawyer, but finalized documents ready for filing. My hand shook as I photographed each page, understanding finally what Karen's big surprise would be. She was planning to humiliate me publicly, probably at the annual meeting, while simultaneously securing her biggest power grab. In her mind, it would be her moment of ultimate triumph. She had no idea it would be her downfall. The announcement came on a Friday evening, delivered with Karen's trademark arrogance as she loosened her blazer and poured herself a glass of Chardonnay. I was folding laundry in the living room, playing the role of the perfect neighbor one last time. I made a decision about you, Rachel, she said, not bothering to look at me as she spoke. I'm issuing a full violation package. I kept my hand steady as I folded one of her spare tablecloths, the same one she'd used at her secret lunch with Rebecca just 2 days earlier. I see. Don't act surprised, dear, Karen continued, swirling her drink. We both know your garden has been dead weight for years. You've become comfortable, complacent. I need residents who challenge me, who match my vision. Someone like Rebecca. She meant someone young and impressed by her stolen success. The papers will be served Monday, she said, finally turning to face me. I'm going to announce it at the annual meeting on Tuesday, right after I present the enforcement initiative. My blood ran cold. Karen, that's very public. Her smile was cruel and calculated. I want everyone to see that I'm starting fresh. New rules, new leadership, new everything. It'll be quite the presentation. I forced myself to look hurt and confused, which wasn't difficult given the circumstances. You're going to humiliate me in front of the entire neighborhood. I'm going to be honest about our situation, she corrected. Besides, it's not like you have any real connection to the community anymore. You gave up your garden business, remember? This is my world now. That weekend, while Karen spent her time with Rebecca at what she told the board was a contractor retreat, Harold and I finalized our plan. We had everything we needed: financial records, stolen proposals, evidence of the affair, and proof of her systematic fraud. The presentation software is already loaded on the community center computer, Harold explained as we sat in his study Sunday evening. I've replaced her enforcement slides with our evidence files. The moment she clicks to the second slide, everything will be revealed. What if she notices something's wrong beforehand? I asked, my nerves finally getting the better of me. She won't, Harold assured me. Karen is too arrogant to double-check her own work. She assumes everything will go exactly as she's planned. Monday morning arrived with Karen in an unusually good mood. She hummed in the shower, spent extra time styling her hair, and chose her most expensive pastel blazer, the one that made her feel invincible. Big day tomorrow, she said over breakfast, not bothering to hide her excitement. The enforcement presentation is going to change everything. I'm sure it will, I replied. And for once, I was telling the complete truth. That evening, Karen brought the violation papers home and left them conspicuously on the kitchen counter. She wanted me to see them, to understand that my fate was sealed. I'll be serving these to you tomorrow, she announced in front of the neighborhood watch group chat she'd looped me into. I think it's important for the board to see that I'm committed to making bold decisions in all areas of community life. I stared at the papers, my heart pounding. Karen, please don't do this publicly. I'll fix whatever you want, but don't humiliate me like this. Humiliation? She laughed, the sound sharp and cold. Rachel, this is liberation for both of us. You'll finally be free to find somewhere more suitable to your level. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This was the woman I'd supported for 8 years. The woman I'd sacrificed my business for. The woman I'd tolerated despite her growing coldness. Besides, she continued, David and the others think it's brilliant. A power move that shows I'm not afraid to make tough decisions. They're looking forward to the show. Of course, her friends were in on it. They'd probably helped her plan the whole humiliating spectacle. That night, I lay awake listening to Karen make quiet phone calls to Rebecca, planning their celebration dinner for after the annual meeting. She was so confident, so certain that tomorrow would mark her ultimate victory. Everything's going to change tomorrow, baby, I heard her whisper. After the presentation, after I deal with Rachel, we can finally be together openly. I closed my eyes and thought about Mr. Jenkins pushed aside to keep him quiet, about all the residents whose ideas Karen had stolen, about the dues she'd embezzled to pay for her affair. Tomorrow, everything would indeed change, just not the way Karen expected. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharp and clear. I dressed carefully in my simple navy dress, professional but not attention-grabbing. Today, I needed to blend into the background until the perfect moment. Karen was practically vibrating with excitement as she adjusted her pearls in our community center mirror. She'd been awake since 5 a.m., reviewing her presentation notes, and practicing her opening lines. "This is it, Rachel," she said, not looking at me as she spoke. "Today changes everything. The enforcement initiative will make me the longest-serving president in Pine Grove history." I nodded silently, watching her slip the violation papers into her briefcase alongside her presentation materials. She'd planned every detail of her public humiliation down to the timing. "You should feel honored," she continued, her reflection smirking back at her. Not many residents get such a memorable violation announcement. The drive to the community center felt surreal. Karen hummed along to the radio while I sat in the passenger seat, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. In a few hours, my 8-year nightmare would be over, but not in the way she expected. The meeting room was already filling up when we arrived. David Rodriguez sat at the head of the polished table, reviewing quarterly reports. The other board members waved enthusiastically at Karen from across the room, their eyes gleaming with anticipation for the show they'd planned. Harold Jenkins nodded politely at me from his corner seat, his expression carefully neutral. Only I could see the slight tension around his eyes that betrayed his nerves. "Ladies and gentlemen," David called the meeting to order at exactly 9 a.m. "We have an exciting presentation from Karen Whitaker regarding the new enforcement initiative." Karen stood up, her confidence radiating through the room like heat from a furnace. She'd worked for this moment her entire presidency, or at least she thought she had. "Thank you, David," she began, clicking her presentation remote with a flourish. The first slide appeared on the massive screen behind her. New enforcement initiative, a game-changing opportunity for standards. Before we dive into the numbers, Karen continued, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of a seasoned dictator. "I want to thank everyone for their support over the past year. This initiative represents not just a regulatory victory, but a testament to Pine Grove's commitment to excellence." Murmurs of approval rippled around the table. Karen basked in the attention, her chest puffing with pride as she surveyed her audience. "The enforcement initiative will protect our property values and bring us unified standards," she announced, gesturing toward the screen. "But more importantly, it establishes me as the premier guardian of community beauty." David started a small round of applause that spread around the table. Karen's smile widened as she soaked up the praise. "Now, before we celebrate this professional milestone," Karen said, her tone shifting to something more personal, "I have some important personal business to address." The room fell silent. I felt every eye turn toward me as Karen reached into her briefcase with theatrical slowness. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. "Change is never easy," Karen continued, pulling out the manila envelope containing my violation papers. "But sometimes bold decisions in our personal lives mirror the bold decisions we make professionally." She walked toward me with deliberate steps, her expensive heels clicking against the tile floor. The envelope felt heavy with symbolism as she placed it directly in front of me. "Rachel," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent room, "consider this your community severance package." David's snicker broke the tension, followed by nervous laughter from 2 other board members. Karen's grin widened as she fed off their approval, completely absorbed in her moment of triumph. "Don't look so shocked, dear," she said, turning back to face the room with her arms spread wide. "We both know this has been coming for months. Now everyone else knows too." More uncomfortable chuckles echoed around the table. But Karen was just getting started. "Now then," she said, clicking to advance to her next slide, "let's talk about those enforcement specifics." But as the screen changed behind her, Karen's confident expression began to falter. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The screen behind Karen erupted with evidence that made the entire room gasp in unison. Bank statements showing systematic theft. Email screenshots revealing her affair with Rebecca. Stolen proposals with other residents' names crossed out and replaced with her own. Karen spun around to face the screen, her face draining of all color as she saw her crimes displayed in devastating detail. "What the hell is this?" she stammered, frantically clicking her remote. But the slides kept advancing automatically, each one more damning than the last. $347,000. Harold Jenkins's voice cut through the shocked silence as he stood from his corner seat. That's how much you've stolen from this community over the past 2 years, Karen. The room erupted in chaos. Board members leaned forward, studying the financial records with growing horror. David Rodriguez's smug expression melted into panic as he realized his friend's downfall would drag him down too. "This is impossible," Karen protested, her voice cracking. "Someone's doctored these files. This is a setup." "Is it?" I said, my voice steady as I stood up slowly, the violation papers still scattered in front of me. For 8 years, I'd been the silent, supportive neighbor. But that woman was gone. "I know everything, Karen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "About Rebecca, about the money you stole, about the residents whose ideas you claimed as your own, about the contractors you betrayed." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You did this?" "We did this," Harold corrected, moving to stand beside me. "Rachel came to me 3 weeks ago with evidence of your crimes. We've been documenting everything since then." The final slide appeared on screen, a comprehensive timeline of Karen's fraud, complete with dates, amounts, and victims. The enforcement initiative itself was revealed as another theft. Karen had stolen the entire proposal from a junior homeowner named Kevin Park who'd been working on it for months. "Security is on their way up," David announced, his phone already in his hand. "Karen Whitaker, you're removed immediately and will be pressing full criminal charges." "This is insane," Karen shouted, her composure completely shattered. "I built this neighborhood. I brought in millions in property value." "You built nothing," I said, my voice stronger now. "You stole, you lied, and you betrayed everyone who trusted you, including this entire community." The community center doors opened and 2 security guards entered, followed by Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit. Harold had coordinated everything perfectly. "Karen Whitaker." Detective Morrison approached with handcuffs ready. "You're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and theft of community funds." As the handcuffs clicked around Karen's wrists, she looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll get nothing in this neighborhood," she snarled. "I'll make sure you're left with nothing." I smiled for the first time in months. "Actually, Karen, since you'll be in prison for the next 5 to 10 years, I think I'll be just fine." The room watched in stunned silence as Karen was led away, her pastel blazer wrinkled, her perfect hair disheveled, her presidency destroyed in the span of 15 minutes. David Rodriguez turned to address the remaining board members. "We'll need to conduct a full audit and reach out to all affected homeowners. This is going to be a difficult period for Pine Grove." "Actually," Harold interjected, "I think we have someone who can help with that." He looked at me with a proud smile. "Rachel has a background in garden design and crisis management. She might be exactly what we need right now." As the community center slowly emptied, I gathered up the violation papers Karen had thrown at me so cruelly just minutes before. Tomorrow, I'd file them myself, against her. But tonight, for the first time in years, I was free. Justice had been served, and I was finally ready to reclaim my garden, my life, and my neighborhood. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of audits, apologies, and quiet celebrations. Residents who had once nodded along with Karen's rules now stopped me in the street to say thank you. Mr. Jenkins got his tree planting idea back. Kevin Park received credit for the enforcement plan that actually made sense. And Rebecca's company lost every contract in the county. Karen's McMansion went into foreclosure faster than you could say HOA violation. Turns out the Personal Enhancement Fund had paid for her illegal pool house and that bright red door she'd find everyone else for even thinking about. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. I stood in my vegetable garden the day the new board voted me in as interim president. The same garden Karen had tried to destroy. Now it grew taller and prouder than ever, with a little American flag waving gently in the breeze, exactly the size I wanted. Neighbors waved as they walked by. "Noah, measure my grass." No one sent anonymous notes about my shutters. Harold stopped by with a bottle of celebratory lemonade. "You did good, Rachel," he said, clinking glasses. "The queen is dead. Long live the gardener." We laughed until our sides hurt, the kind of laugh that comes after months of holding your breath. Later that evening, as the sun set over Pine Grove Estates, I sat on my porch and opened the community app. The old Karen's rules thread had been replaced with Rachel's garden tips. The first post was simple: plant what makes you happy. Water it with patience. And never let a Karen tell you otherwise. The comments poured in, real ones from real neighbors. No more fear. No more fake smiles. Just people finally living like neighbors instead of subjects. I leaned back in my chair, the same chair where I'd once hidden my phone recordings, and smiled at the stars. Somewhere in a holding cell, Karen was probably still screaming about standards. But here, in the quiet suburban night, the only standard that mattered was the one we'd finally chosen for ourselves. And it tasted sweeter than any pastel cocktail she'd ever poured. The end.